Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Happiness and Higher Ed podcast. My name is John Hill, and I use he, him pronouns. This is episode 19, and my guest today is Jordan Hunter. And before I formally introduce Jordan, I still don't know why I do this, but I'm going to read our mission statement. So, in a world that can be engulfed in darkness, we must shine bright and lead the charge for a better future. As we continue to shape and challenge emerging adults' minds, it is also our duty to reflect and remember what makes us happy and why we continue to do the work that we do. So here we go. Formally introducing. This is Jordan Hunter. Jordan's from Simi Valley, California, but is currently living in Orange County. He went to CSU Monterey Bay for an undergrad to obtain his bachelor's of science in kinesiology with a concentration in exercise science. Great major. That's what I have too. Just saying. After he graduated in 2016, Jordan worked as a competitive sports assistant for the recreation department at CSUMB and a physical therapy aide for performance PT in Monterey, California for a year. Jordan then went to Washington State University to obtain his master's in sports management and worked as a graduate assistant for the Washington State University Recreation. He now works for UCI Campus Recreation as a competitive sports director. Jordan loves playing video games, basketball, and finding new places to eat and drink for fun. Is there anything else that you would like me to, or would like to say?
That about hits everything at this
That
point.
hits it. Okay.
Yeah, hits it all.
All right, that's cool. That's cool. All right, so if you're cool with it, I'm just gonna start the questions then.
Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. So the first question that I have for you is, what was the reason you started to pursue a career in higher education?
I'm guessing it's going to be pretty similar to everybody else's, story in higher education. I did not want to go into higher education. I was a kinesiology major, like you mentioned already, and I wanted to go into physical therapy. That was my goal. That's what I went to school for. And around my junior year, I got a job as a referee for intramural sports at CSU Monterey Bay, and I worked there for about a year as a referee and then got promoted to be a supervisor. So while I'm still, in kinesiology classes and things like that, getting prepared for physical therapy, I kind of found that new niche of intramural sports and recreation and campus recreation. And then my boss at the time, Tim Collins, kind of introduced me to the world of NIRSA, which is the National Institute of National Intramural Recreational Sports Association. That's a mouthful, but
it is for sure.
he introduced me to that and kind of talked about the avenues that campus recreation and higher education can kind of take you. And he kind of described his route and other routes that you can take and things like that, and kind of piqued my interest. But I was still at that time not fully convinced. And I finally graduated in 2016, got my bachelor's, and I was kind of at a crossroads and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't have all of my prereqs yet for physical therapy school. So at the very least, I would have needed to just go to school or go back to like community college before I was able to apply to a PT school. And at the same time, I was working as a physical therapy aide at this place called Performance Physical Therapy in Monterey, California. And I was working there for about a year at the exact same time as that. So I was taking classes at Monterey Peninsula College. So physics, biology, psychology, a whole bunch of like different prereqs that I needed that I didn't get at CSUMB. I was working as a physical therapy aide at Performance, and then I was also working for Cal State Monterey Bay as the competitive sports assistant, basically an intern position that was paid there. So I was working two jobs and taking like 3 or 4 classes. I hated my life. I was just exhausted all the time. I had no time there was zero, like, I didn't even know the term work-life balance, right? That wasn't even in my vocabulary at that point. So I was not practicing it well. I was exhausted. And it kind of came down to me just like one night kind of just stopping and like asking myself, what makes me the most happy. Like, what do I get the most enjoyment out of? And I loved PT. That was so much fun to me, working with patients, working with different physical therapists, and just kind of like being a part of that health world. But there is nothing that I would rather do than work with students and work with sports. And so I just said, I think I'm going to go the route of campus recreation. And at that point, I was, didn't know too much about graduate assistantships, but I knew enough that I like where to apply to them. So I applied to literally one. I applied to Cal State, or I mean, not Cal State, I was already there, Washington State University. And I applied for the graduate assistantship, and then I also applied for the grad program of sport management, which is the Master's of Education program. And I applied, got a call for an interview like 3 weeks later. And I interviewed, and at this point, I'm also still very new to campus recreation and intramural sports. So I don't have a whole lot of like experience. So I do the interview and I think I just bomb it. And I think I'm like, maybe I should go with PT after that interview. And then they're like, well, we'll call you in about a week and let you know after the process. And thanks for interviewing with us. And I'm like, I'm out. I know I'm out. I would not choose me if I had that option. So I wrote it off. And then 2 days later, they say, we would like to offer you the position. And I was like shocked and scared and didn't know what to do exactly. And I basically called my mom, called my dad. I was like, hey, this is what I just got offered, and I think I want to do it. And they were fully supportive. They weren't very knowledgeable, which most people aren't, about what campus recreation is or what it entails, or things like that. So they were kind of skeptical at first, but definitely supportive. And after that, I packed my bags and went up to Pullman, Washington for 2 years and was a graduate assistant for competitive sports and special events there. Learned a lot, loved it up there. Pullman's definitely like a college heavy town. There's absolutely nothing else there except for Washington State.
I know a few of those towns, just a few of them.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those places where, like, if you don't support the Cougs, you are basically, you don't even live there, So it was definitely a cool experience, a lot different than Cal State Monterey Bay, but I learned a lot, and I was able to obtain my master's of sport management. And after that, I was like, I'm sold, like I'm all in higher education. So that's where I applied to a bunch of different schools for professional staff jobs for competitive sports or intramural sports, and looked at a few different places, and UCI popped up and interviewed there. And I loved the area in general. I'd always I thought I was going to Disneyland every time I came like anywhere near Orange County. So when I heard of UCI and like their job opportunity, I was like, absolutely, like I'm going to be down in Orange County. And so I applied there, got the interview, got the job, and been working here for about 2 years now. So
nice.
All in all, I kind of just stumbled into higher education, but it definitely is something that I enjoy and love, like coming to work every day.
Got you. Nice.
Yeah.
No, I know, because you're definitely in like my backyard, because I grew up in Orange County and I grew up in Huntington Beach.
Nice. Yep.
And so I totally get the concept of every day I'm gonna go to Disneyland. So I mean, I have a couple questions of what you had mentioned, but have you gone to Disneyland since you've been at UCI?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Funny part is I was about to be a annual pass holder right before the pandemic. So literally 2 weeks before everything got shut down, I had made plans to go to Disney and then purchase the annual pass and just be an annual pass holder. I'll get the magnet that everybody puts on the back of their car. I had this whole grand plan, and then the pandemic happens and like, boom, it gets shut down. I'm like, okay, maybe in a month, and quickly realized that this is not just a quick like 2 or 3 week process of a pandemic. This is going to be a while. So they shut down the annual pass, and then finally they reopened just this past, I think April is when they technically reopened. But they brought back the annual pass. They call it like the magic key now, which it just sounds like it's going to cost me more money, but I finally got it. I got it. And I went just this past Saturday, actually, for the first time since the pandemic. And it's nothing's changed about it. It's still amazing. I mean, outside of the Avengers campus, which is amazing. Big fan of Marvel. So that was awesome to be there for. I felt like a little kid. And then we didn't get to go to like the Star Wars land just because it was such a busy day. But yeah, I'll definitely be back. Definitely going back soon.
Okay. I haven't been back to Disneyland. I think the last time that I went was the holidays of 2019. So I went right before that. But I think it's for anyone that is listening that has never had the opportunity to be a pass holder, it's magical, which to say the least, and to use all the Disney possible phrases you can think of. It's definitely a magical experience.
There's nothing
expensive.
Better than, it's definitely expensive, but there's nothing better than Disneyland during the holidays. I mean, even if you don't like the rides or the fanfare, Disney during the holidays is something to like just marvel at. It's amazing. It's so cool.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And the other question that I had that you mentioned is it's kind of like a counter question, but what was it like, or what was that process? Because I mean, speaking from my own experience, I was CSUMB and then was like, got into grad school. All right, let's go to another state, another part of the US. What was that experience like for you? Like, you just pack up your car and just like to drive, or what was that experience like?
It kind of feels like that looking back on it, but I mean, at the time I was, I had just graduated from CSUMB, which, if anybody knows what CSUMB is, it is a very small school. There's not much happening outside of school, and then the occasional going down to Monterey or wherever for a hike or Big Sur or things like that. So there's not much happening. It's not really a college town per se, and that was like one of the big things that my boss at the time, Tim Collins, he told me about it, about GA shifts and things like that. He's like, one thing you should look for is something that you haven't experienced yet, and that was definitely on my bucket list. After 4 years of CSUMB, I wanted something that I hadn't experienced yet. Also, one of my friends, Josh Lewis, he was an intramural supervisor before me. He was my boss technically, but now we're really good friends. He did the exact same thing, where he went from Monterey Bay to University of Miami, and I was just kind of like following him, and he was talking about his experiences there. And I was like, I want to go to a D1 school. Like, that sounds amazing, where, there's, a sport program, there's tradition, there's, things like that.
Football team.
A football team that was huge. I mean, first of all, Monterey Bay undefeated in football. I think everybody should recognize that.
The best t-shirt you can buy, undefeated.
From the bookstore. But I wanted to have that experience. So when I was looking at grad schools, Washington State popped up, and I had never really thought of going to Washington or moving outside of California, but I wanted to get out. I wanted to experience something different, and Pullman is definitely different. It is not anything like I had ever experienced up to that point. But it was valuable, and I tell all of my students, like, if you ever have the opportunity to leave California, because most of my students have, born and raised California, haven't left at all. If you have the opportunity to leave and experience something different, do it, because not only is it like good for you to grow as a person and broaden your horizons, all the cliche sayings you can say, it makes you appreciate California when you do come back, right? If you do make that choice, you do want to come back to California, it makes you appreciate it a little bit more, because there's things that you have here that you don't have in other states, and there's things that you don't have in California that other states are boasting with, right? And that's things that people don't really realize until they actually get out of their own like little bubble that they have. So it was definitely like I want to get out. I want to experience something different. But looking back on it, it really was just packing my car. I'm driving up to I'm driving from Simi Valley all the way up to Pullman, Washington. So, and it was a trip. It was fun though.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Cause I think you highlighted something that like, I think when you leave the state, like whatever state you're at, I think, and have a different experience and like go to a different type of school, different type of environment, I think it really kind of like sets you up perfectly for like the thing, like you create a list of like needs and wants for your next position, and like you could choose to come back to the state, you could choose to come back to the school. Exactly. But at least you have the ability to see what you really like need. Cause like, I mean, Pullman, I can't speak to it. I mean, I applied to Washington State. But I mean, going out to Western, like we didn't have the simplicities of like Monterey, like even something as simple as like Chipotle. Yeah. We had to drive an hour and some change to the nearest Chipotle. But I mean, it is what it is.
It is. So, that's part of the experience almost. Pullman didn't have a Target, and there is nothing worse than realizing how much you use like certain things like Target or like your favorite, Mexican spot or whatever it is. Like there's certain things that you don't realize you miss until you don't have it. And Target was one of them. So that was definitely an eye opener. Costco too.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, because in California, you could basically like, throw a quarter and you'd hit a Costco or, hit a Target. So
all of them, Costco, Target, 7-Eleven, they're literally on every block almost in California.
I think it's funny that you mentioned 7-Eleven, because that was one of the things that being in Illinois, there was no 7-Elevens until I got to Chicago. And then every time that I was in Chicago, I would like, it was just a whole brand new experience. I'd be like, oh my gosh, they got 7-Eleven here. And then having to explain like, why that's meant,
such a big deal.
I know
why this one 7-Eleven is the biggest deal to you.
Because I mean, like different places across the different. I mean, like Texas, they have Buc-ee's. I mean, and Wisconsin, they have Quick Trip. So it's just like little things that being there, you're like, oh, 7-Eleven. I remember growing up and having a Slurpee and like being like that was the pinnacle of a great day.
Right. Yeah. A Slurpee is really just bringing your whole nostalgia back, and it's like you can literally just fall forward and you'll find a 7-Eleven in California, which is funny.
Yep. So, but nice. So moving on to the next thing that we got here is what makes you happy? I know it's a loaded question. One thing from higher ed and then one personal thing.
One thing that makes me happy from higher ed, it's definitely a loaded question. I would definitely say that seeing my students go somewhere outside of campus recreation. And I know that sounds kind of weird because a lot of people want to keep themselves or their students and whoever their understudies are in the same realm. But I think it's so awesome when I see my students that graduate, go into something that they are truly passionate about, right? Not something that is just like the easy route. I'm not saying that I did that or something that other people in campus rec or higher ed in general do. I'm saying that we found our passion in the higher ed, right? We found something that we are truly passionate about. And I think that's probably the most rewarding thing, is finding somebody or having one of my students find their passion and then pursue it and do it. For example, I had one of my students graduated during the pandemic. He graduated in 2020 and he is now an engineer, and he's doing some great things. I followed him on Instagram and he's doing some crazy things. And I realized that he was way smarter than me when he kind of started talking about the things he was doing before he graduated.
Mhm.
But he's doing some great things, and it's really cool to see how he's kind of like become this whole like new person outside of, you know, competitive sports, which is all that, you know, I really knew him for in the beginning of our kind of relationship, because he
Mhm.
was, you know, my student staff and he was doing that. I knew that he wanted to go into some field of engineering, but I didn't know exactly what. And it wasn't until like after I had multiple conversations with him, I figured out why he wants to do it and what his, you know, passions are in it. And he graduated and now he's doing it. And that feels so good because I know that he's truly enjoying doing what he's doing. And
Mhm.
that makes me feel just amazing. And it makes me feel like I actually, you know, even if I had nothing to do with his engineering or whatever they get into their field, it makes me feel good knowing that I didn't, you know, hinder them in doing that
Yeah,
at the very least.
you helped them through the journey of
Exactly.
undergrad, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think that's always tough because I know so many people that got through undergrad that aren't doing anything that they, you know, they really truly love, or there's no passion behind it. And it's like, I just don't want to have any hand in that. I want to make sure if you're done at wherever you are, whether it's UCI, CSUMB, or wherever, that you are going to actually, you know, do something that you truly love. Because at the end of the day, that's something that's priceless.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know?
And then what about one
Oh, the
personal?
other
Sorry,
part. Yeah.
you're good.
Yeah. The personal one thing that makes me happy. Oh man.
Disneyland. I know for sure it's Disneyland.
Disney's up there. This is starting to turn into an ad for Disneyland, and they do not need any more money. So I'm going to stop talking about Disney.
Okay.
Um, one thing that makes me happy outside of work, personally, I think just getting texts and calls from people I haven't talked to in a while. I have a good is one of my flaws, and I've talked about this a lot to my, you know, my significant other, my friends, my family, things like that. I do a really good job at talking to, like, being present in the moment. I do a great job of that. I don't want to toot my own horn, but like if you're in front of me, you're getting my full undivided attention all the time.
Can confirm through this experience. Can confirm.
You're going to get my full undivided attention all the time if you're in
Mhm.
front of me. That's great, but it kind of hurts the relationships when they're not right in front of me. So I sometimes lack in the texts and the calls to people who are, you know, not in the same area, not in the same state, country, whatever it is. And I've had multiple relationships where that relationship has kind of deteriorated because of my lack of effort in that. So when I get that call or I get that text from somebody that I haven't talked to in a while, it one just confirms that they still want to be friends with me. So,
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And two, it confirms that I still do have an impact on people that I don't see, you know, like every single day, and that they want to keep that relationship. And I need to do, you know, better with that relationship too. You know, it inspires me to be like, give them a random text the next day or give them a call, you know, a month later, whatever it is, just kind of checking in on them because, you know, it keeps my sanity of, you know, I'm doing something right in my relationships.
Mhm.
And I know I can do well in person, but when I'm not in person with that, you know, with that person or with those people, I can continue those relationships and keep building them, you know. And I think that's what makes me like genuinely happy is when I get those texts or calls or random shout outs on, you know, on Instagram or whatever it is
Yeah.
on social media, just because it's something that happens not rarely, but it's something that like uh, that not many people do anymore. I feel like I think pandemic has been a little different. I think a lot of people have been reaching out and doing different things. But prior to that, it's like it definitely was not something that a lot of people would do.
Mhm.
And I think that it's something that I truly like admire and makes me happy on like a spiritual like well-being level.
Yeah. No, and I think it's kind of challenging, you know, when you
Mhm.
think about how you have so many things going on in your life outside of like reaching out to people that like might have talked to in a while. But I think it is a very good feeling when you have someone that you like. You could be thinking about them. You could have been like, oh, I probably should send them a text message. You don't send them a text message, and they call you, and you're just like, oh, hey, like,
yeah, exactly. It's like it makes you, it confirms that like you weren't the only one like thinking about them, you know?
Yeah. And I think too, like you another thing that you had mentioned too, and that specifically is that sometimes it's really good to know about that, who like that piece about you where you're just like, I am just not necessarily the best at this. And, but I mean, at least you, once again, can confirm you have been amazing and super present throughout this episode and before. But I think that like, that's something too, that like having those conversations with people is key, because then it just kind of makes it seem that like, I haven't forgot about you. It's not that I don't want to talk to you,
right?
But sometimes it's just not on the forefront of my mind. We all
life gets in the way.
Yeah. And I think that, especially like at undergrad, I never really understood that concept until I had to start paying bills and had to start doing other things,
growing up really sucks sometimes. It really does. It forces you to like prioritize everything in your life, not just like work wise. Everything in your life has to take some sort of priority, and that's tough.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to Taylor, who was on the podcast. I cannot remember what episode to save my life, but Taylor, we were talking about how it's working in higher ed specifically, and how like we all love our calendar. We all love to throw things on our calendar. It's really key to also do that for your personal life, so that like you can blend both of those things, so that what's going on in your like day-to-day life. But it's also important to like hold those boundaries of like, when someone's like, hey, can you like stay late on Thursday, and you're like, unfortunately I can't. I have to be here to have a podcast episode with Jordan to have a podcast over with Jordan. But yeah, that was just something we were talking about, and when you mentioned that, I was like, that is true. It's funny
that you mentioned that. I have to schedule a lunch for myself sometimes, when I have like really busy weeks at work. I have to like put in my calendar, like from 12 to 12:30 or 12 to 12:45, I'm taking a lunch, and it like forces me to actually go do that, because some days I'll just grab like whatever I brought or whatever it is, and just like go back to my office and like do a working lunch where I'm like eating and answering emails at the same time, getting lettuce all over my keyboard. But that's not really good. That's not great to like just be working 8 or 9 straight hours and not giving yourself like a mental break. So I've tried to, like, if I know that I'm going to be busy in a week, I try and put that on my calendar of like just taking a lunch and relaxing for 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes,
Yeah, because I think you had touched on it too. If like you have the ability to like take a rest and like just for whatever, like you said, like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, however long that is, like it's just you, and you could, if you choose to answer emails and get lettuce on your keyboard, then that's what happens. But or you can just sit there and like be in a calm position of just eating your lunch and then moving on to the next thing after that time. But that's awesome. No, I think I say this not because I'm proud that you did that, because I know a lot of people don't do that. So
yeah, I know a lot of people that don't do that too, and I try and force like at least my coworkers that I talk to on a regular basis, like, what are you still doing? Like, it's like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we've all been here since like 9. I'm like, you going home? They're like, well, I got to get these. I'm like, the work's going to be there tomorrow. I guarantee you that. Like, just go home, relax, take your mind off things. Don't email anybody. Just go home and like take your mind off things, because you got to have that work-life balance. And sometimes it doesn't come from yourself, that sometimes it has to come from somebody else, because you're so engulfed into whatever you're doing. And I'll always be that person to say to go home or take yourself a lunch. I may not practice it myself, but I will 100% want to be the one to help somebody else into that.
Yeah, that could definitely be on a plaque. Work's going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah. Seriously.
Everyone walks in at the beginning of the day and just slaps that plaque, and then it's all good. Like,
once you get that under your belt, I think everything else will come a lot easier.
Yeah, that's true. So, but no, that's awesome.
Mm.
So the next question that I have for you is, what keeps you resilient in the face of some of the challenges you've faced, whether that be like budget cuts, stress in the pandemic, anything really?
Mhm. A lot of different techniques kind of go into like what keeps me resilient or keeps me going. I think simple ones, just like unplugging like from work as soon as I get home, right? Leaving my phone like in a different room where I'm at, or uh, just throwing on whatever video game I want to play at the time, or just talking to my roommates at the time. It's better for me to do simple things than like big extravagant, like we're gonna throw a party for the weekend and all this stuff. I was like, that just sounds even more exhausting than like actual work,
Sounds
so
exhausting. I'm tired of thinking about it right now.
so I'd rather kind of just do simple things on a daily basis. I definitely have tried different avenues. I like to play basketball a lot. I love to go out and play basketball a lot. And that kind of like, that's like my happy place. I love to just like go into a gym and play basketball, and I don't really have to think about anything except for like what's happening on the court at that time. I've tried meditating. I'll work out sometimes. I'll go on walks, things like that, like just different things like to keep it fresh and like not stagnant, because I definitely can see myself getting less and less intrigued by the idea of doing, say, just as an example, meditation, right? I can find myself just doing it just to do it because I tell myself I'm doing it, but not really getting much from it, because I don't know, I'm kind of the type of person that needs some sort of variety in their lives. Like from time to time, I can't just do the same thing over and over again. Kind of probably the reason I chose higher education. There's something new every single day.
Every day. Every hour, sometimes too.
Yeah, depending on the time of year. Yeah, every hour. But yeah, so I definitely try different things. I love to listen to podcasts. I love to watch different TV shows, movies, try new recipes. Those little like stress relief techniques definitely help me stay resilient. And at the end of the day, I think that the biggest thing for me, I think if there's like any sort of a problem or some sort of like a hurdle that I needed to get over, I think it's a lot of like, I don't say it out loud enough, but self-affirmation things of like, you've gotten this far, don't stop now, right? Or there are things that my dad used to tell me, like like the old adage of like, be a leader, not a follower, things like that, that really like kind of stuck with me over the years. And that's those things I kind of just keep telling myself over and over in my head, and that kind of gets me through those different scenarios. But it's definitely something that I've tried to learn, and now I'm also relearning after the pandemic, right? I think the pandemic was just a roller coaster, right? I mean, we're still in it technically, like we're still in that pandemic, but
can confirm.
From March 2020 till now, it was a roller coaster, right? There's like pandemics hitting in March, and then April we're like all realizing, well, this is serious. And then end of May, the Black Lives Matter movement happens, and the whole speaking your mind movement happens, and all those things are kind of popping up. And there's definitely different ideas of how that played out and things like that, but at the end of the day, there's still like there's things that aren't, kind of, for me at least, not very debatable. And it's actually funny, I talked to my significant other, who's also a person of color, and we talk about like reminiscing back on where were you summer of 2020 and things like that. And it's funny, we talk about the over analyzing that a lot of people did, and the overreaching sometimes that some people would go through, and it kind of showed you where where people stood and what they would do to like be on a certain side. And it's kind of hard to like wrap your brain around it all at once, because we're in a pandemic right now. There's actually people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying all the time, like all day. And we don't really have time to like stop and think about like, where are you in that whole like process of finding out who you are, finding out how you treat others and things like that. So looking back at that summer of 2020, we're like thinking about, how did we impact our lives, how did we impact each other's lives, and then how did others impact our lives, you know what I mean? And we all think that we have a great circle around us, but those are some of the times that you get to see the true character of that person. And I think that was definitely a really good time for America, for our country. But it definitely puts you in a spot where you don't always know. Was a quote. I literally just heard it and I loved it. You don't always know what character is, but you know exactly what it isn't. And that was something that stuck with me, and it was definitely helped me realize like, okay, I know who I am, and I know what I bring to the table. I'm confident in myself and who I've surrounded myself with. So I definitely think that there's different things that have happened in the past that that may or may not really put people on a pedestal or things like that. But I definitely enjoy who I have in my circle. And during that summer of 2020, it kind of showed out. And that was a long answer. I just realized I tried to like loop it all back around, but that summer definitely showed me who I had in my circle and who I, surround myself with. And I am so happy with who I have in my circle right now. And that summer helped big time.
Well, and I think that like it talking through that, it kind of goes to show that like in your circle specifically, that like that can help you in situations when you need to be resilient or like need to like talk through things. Who you have to, you can go to, you have the ability to be like, the pandemic showed me who those individuals are. And like, I know if I'm ever at a struggle or I needed to process something that happens, because something happens every day, and it's so sad to say, but it's this is just unfortunately the way that it is sometimes. And like there's no right or like there's no way to get around that, unfortunately, and it still sucks. But you can go to those individuals because you've identified them, and it makes it the process, I wouldn't say easier, but it's not necessarily like you can go to someone and then just be like, I don't really get it, don't understand the concept, doesn't make sense to me. But now you have those individuals that you're like, I can go to these folks and be like, I just need to process this.
At the end of the day, you're just kind of lending an ear. And one of the things that I forget where I saw it, somewhere on social media, was I think we all need to start asking, before we like divulge our whole, all of our problems that we've had in the day, is asking the person who you're about to talk to, are you mentally okay to take that on? Because that's also another big part, right? Of like, if somebody's already having like a terrible day, you shouldn't also add on to them with your problems, right? You should at least, have the courtesy to ask like, hey, how are you doing? Let me like gauge where you're at before I start spilling the beans on everything that's been going on in my day.
Yeah, no. And that's for sure something that I've seen going around, because I could probably name off like a list of like 8 people that I've seen that post that. And that was posted today, like this morning, or like, I don't know when it was like specifically time wise, but like 8 people have shared it since then.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
I saw that a while ago. That's funny that today it's been.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I think that it's also a really good constant reminder though, that like, it's not necessarily just like one time that you posted it and you're like, all right, cool, I got this, hands down. Because I sometimes, depending upon the day that you've had, like you can definitely be in a situation where you just I need to talk to someone about this. And like the
Right.
first person, I mean, it could be someone that you live with, it could be someone that like you consistently talk with. But I mean, sometimes
Hmm.
that isn't at the forefront of our mind in those situations. So to like have it be not like reinforced, but just a reminder that hey, sometimes that person isn't going to be in the right mindset to
Right.
have someone potentially. I don't want to say dump that onto them, but just like to be a lending ear in that moment. So
Exactly. Yeah,
so
I definitely agree.
cool. All right. I just looked down at the time and I was like, oh yeah, we did talk about that for a while. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, I know you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but what are some of the ways that you practice self-care to stay on your A game?
Yeah, I mean, I yeah, I did actually talk about. I just realized that last answer I gave was ridiculously long, but
Yeah.
I definitely do try to do different things. I like to go out and grab a different, place that I saw on TikTok, whether it's actually good or not. It's the food on TikTok. I have a bone to pick with everybody that does those food TikToks because sometimes they just do it just to do it, even if the food doesn't taste good. But I love to go try the new things out, try new bars, new restaurants, different hiking spots. I'd love to go to the beach. I definitely want to like start doing more of the meditation and I used to do yoga. I used to say that I did yoga for a while after I had not done it for like a couple of years, and now I've finally like given myself that like it's okay, Jordan. You can let it go. Like you don't do yoga anymore. But I used to love doing yoga and I would love to get back into it and get that routine of doing yoga again. Um, and yeah, I play basketball. I love to just be outside. I love to also be inside sometimes, watching a movie, cooking, playing video games, watching any sort of new Netflix show that everybody's raving about. Um, but yeah, I try and do like different things a lot. I like to keep an active lifestyle where I'm not really sitting in one place for a long time. But there's always those days where sometimes it's got to be a pile and just sit and close all the blinds and watch football or any sort of sport or any sort of movie all day. So I like to keep it a variety of things going on to keep my stress levels at bay.
Mhm.
And whenever there's like a time where I feel like overstressed, I like to, just sit outside a little bit, just kind of like take in nature for a little bit because like breathing in general helps me when I'm like overstressed, like
Mhm.
breathing through my nose, out through my mouth. Um, those little things like help me like when I'm like at my breaking point. So I usually don't get to my breaking point. There's very few times I could probably count on one hand, probably two hands, um, where I've reached that point. So when I do, it's probably something really bad has happened. But
Mhm.
I think that's because I do a lot of things like preemptively to not get to that point. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that was something that you had definitely mentioned, and something that I picked up on was that it kind of like you do what you need in that moment.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily like have a one thing that you go to and that you always consistently do, because I think that
Yeah.
like I I think that's the one thing that we talk about is like I mean, we had talked about this beforehand about like hobbies and things, and
Mhm.
like sometimes when you just have one specific thing that you do, you kind of get burnt out on it, and then all of a sudden you're like, now I'm stressed and I can't do this thing to
Yeah.
like to calm myself down or to like relieve some of that stress. And now what do I do? So I think that
Mhm.
like you touched on like the breath or the just the vast plethora
Mhm.
of things. Thank you, plethora of
Yeah.
things that you have that you can pull out of like out of your basket or out of your
Yeah.
toolbox to be like, all right, this is what we're doing today.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome, and especially
Yeah.
like going through the pandemic and it's just sometimes working in a higher ed. Like if we're just being honest and being real about it, like it can get
Mhm.
stressful. Like
Yeah.
it's just the way that
It
it is
happens.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So
And it's always interesting because like I'm always one to look for something new, and it's always interesting to see like people who are like uber successful. The people are making just stupid money and all that stuff. And they're like, well, yeah, I meditate 7 times a day. I'm like, where in this busy schedule that you have do you find time to like meditate 7 times a day? And sometimes I'm just like, I think they're full of it, but also let me try at least once a day, let me see if that actually works for me. And I did meditate for a little bit, and then I stopped, and then I'll get back on. And then it's kind of like something I've kind of learned that the way at least my brain works, I'm okay with like trying something new every single time. Like the routine is to try something new.
Yeah.
And I've kind of come to terms with that. And even though it may seem like unorthodox to most, like I don't really have like a one thing that I do that like calms me down, because sometimes video games gets me riled up too. So it's not like I'm always using one thing just to calm down. I think it's a plethora, great word again, a plethora of things that keep me at bay, and happy.
Nice. No, it's yeah. The last question that I have for you is, what is one piece of advice you live by in your practice?
One piece of advice, that is really tough, because there's a lot of advice that I have been given over the years. And I think the thing that I definitely live by, like on a day-to-day basis, is the golden rule of just like treating others the way that you would want to be treated. And anybody that knows me, like I do everything in my power for those that I love and I care for. And I definitely try and make that apparent on like just a day-to-day basis. For me, like if I'm just like going into work, right, and I have student staff that are working, and they make an effort to know my name, and it's tough because there's so many students and stuff like that. But like if it's somebody who like is habitually there, I always make an effort to like kind of get to know them, get to know what their name is, get to know what they like, what year they are, things like that. So, and those things helped me when I was probably like their year or their age kind of thing. I would always want someone to, do something that helped them in that time, to to get them through whatever it was, or just to kind of like guide them into the right direction. I would always want them to do that for me. So if I'm going to do what others want, do treat others the way that they want to be treated, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to give them whatever it is that they need to help them move forward. So I definitely have been trying my best to do everything that I can to help others around me, help my students. I'll do anything for my students. I would help them with any sort of, job opportunity or homework or whatever it is. They all have their own, like, their lives that they're trying to figure out. But I always like let them know like I'm there for them and I want to help them out. But at the same time, I also don't want to, overstep that boundary of like, sometimes you got to figure things out on your own. So I let them know I'm here. But at the end of the day, it's kind of on them to choose if they want that. And if they do choose that, I'm 100% giving. So, yeah, I think just the golden rule of just treating others the way that you would want to be treated, is something I live by on a daily basis, and bring it to work, bring it to just life, my personal life, every day.
Nice. And something else that I was hearing from like what you were saying is kind of like also like give back to others that like have kind of like given to you. So like pass that along away, and with the journey, because like they had helped you. So if you have the ability to help others, you might as well take that, because then you can help others in like whatever it may be, like a job or in a position of that you're working with them in. So
paying it forward is huge for me. I'm not really big into astrology. Like, apparently I'm a Gemini. I don't know what my rising moon is or whatever the whole thing is. I have no idea. Zero idea. And I actually have zero admiration, or like I just don't care. But there's one thing that I do like really abide by, is like karma. And I think that's definitely real. And I think, paying it forward is definitely good karma. And I would definitely rather be on the side of having good karma than bad karma, because when something just like a freak accident happens, or you wake up and you stub your toe as soon as you wake up and your whole day is ruined. It's like, I probably did something to deserve this. Like that's kind of how my brain works, which is
Okay.
probably not great, but I probably did something to deserve this, whether it's, something small like cutting somebody off on the freeway, or, bigger, which I couldn't even fathom right now. But yeah, I definitely live my life on just trying to do more good than bad. So paying it forward is definitely one of those things that I put in that good pile.
Got you. Nice. No, that's awesome.
Mhm.
That's amazing. So, well, that's the last question that I have for you. Is there anything else that you would like to say or add before we sign off here?
No, I mean, I definitely appreciate you having me. I was kind of nervous in the beginning. I'll probably like look back and watch this and be like, "Oh, Jordan, what are you doing?" So, yeah, I appreciate this, and I really hope that more people are able to be a guest on this, and are able to give good advice, because I'm sure in higher education there's a lot of stories like mine that people are able to connect with and then share their own
Mhm.
sides too.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna try my best to keep it going for as long as before it turns into something that I don't not want to do. Because right now I want to do this, so
Good.
we're gonna keep it going for as long as possible.
That's
But
awesome.
so yeah, I appreciate you being a guest. I appreciate you for saying yes to this, and thank you again for being here and for answering my questions.
Mhm.
It's been a blast. And to everyone at home, I just want to remind everyone it's that great time of the podcast where I just say, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So, once again, Jordan, thank you. I appreciate you for coming on and for your answers. And yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. So,
Thanks.
bye.